focus, one that has inspired us all for many years. Tonight, I want to introduce to you the legend, Dr. Martin Luther King.
I'm happy to join with you today. What will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who were seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of captivity. 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation. 100 years later. 100 years later, the Negro lives in a lonely island of poverty, in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro still languishes in the corners of American society and finds himself an exile in his own land. So we've come here today. We've come here today to dramatize an appalling condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men would be guaranteed the unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious that America has defaulted on this promissory note as far as the citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check. Check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come here today to cash this check. It's a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We've also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It'll be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not end until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if this nation continues business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is given his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundation of this nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there is something I must say to my people. You stand on the warm threshold that leads into the palace of justice. In the process of seeking to gain our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. We must forever construct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic height of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy, which has engulfed the Negro community, must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is bound to our destiny, and their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who ask the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies are heavy with the fatigue of travel, can't find lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. No, we can never be satisfied as long as the Negro in Mississippi cannot vote, and the Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we're not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice flows down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. Now, I'm not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come here fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come here from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the wind of police brutality. You are the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. So go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of the northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. In spite of all the difficulties and frustrations of the moment, I say to you today, my friends, that I still have a dream.
Tell us that dream, brother.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day in Mississippi, desert state sweltering with the heat of injustice and oppression, I have a dream that one day in Mississippi, justice will be a reality for all of God's children. I have a dream that one day down there in Alabama, with his vicious racists, whose governor's lips are dripping with words of interposition and nullification. Yes, down there in Alabama, little black boys and little black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and little white girls and walk together as sisters and brothers. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. The mountain and hill shall be made low, the rough places shall be made plain. Crooked places shall be made straight, the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith with which we return to the South. And with this faith, we'll be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we'll be able to transform the jangling discord of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we'll be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing we will be free one day. This will be the day when all God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Of thee I sing, land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride on every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And if America is going to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring. Let freedom ring from the prodigious hills of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain in Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. When we let it ring, when we let freedom ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we'll be able to speed up that day when all God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last.